Hi there! In this video, I will show you how to create a custom risk assessment model from scratch using SoftComply Risk Manager Plus on Jira Cloud. A risk model defines how your team assesses risks, including the characteristics you evaluate, the assessment stages you follow, and the criteria used to determine whether a risk is acceptable. To begin, open the Apps section in Jira and select Risk Manager Plus. Then navigate to the risk models and click Create New Risk Model. First, choose the type of risk model that you want to create. Your choice depends on the number of characteristics that your team uses to assess risks. For example, a two-dimensional model can calculate risks using probability and impact. A three-dimensional model can include an additional characteristic such as detectability. And you can also use an RPN model if your team is calculating the risk priority number or a risk score. Remember that with a risk score-based model, you can also choose between different formulas for calculating the risk score itself. You can also create nested risk models, which means that you can create the risk model as an input for the parent risk model. This is a methodology very often used for cybersecurity risk management, especially when you have to adhere to NIST cybersecurity framework. Next, you have the risk assessment iterations. Iteration represents a different stage at which a risk is assessed. For example, you might assess the initial or inherent risk before any controls or mitigations have been applied. You can then have the current or residual risk assessment once the controls have already been implemented. But you can also have a third iteration. Let's say that your safety critical product has been put on the market and risks are then discovered by the users. And this third iteration could then be post-market risk assessment that you are doing once the feedback from customers is coming back. Now let's configure the values for each risk characteristic. Give every value a clear name and description so that users can understand exactly when it should be selected. In here, let's say that we have severity and probability, but we want to change the levels. We can drag and drop them here if we want to. We can rename the characteristics. The well-defined criteria help different team members assess similar risks consistently. Now let's define your risk classes. These may include categories such as low, medium, and high, or we can create one more risk class called critical and give it also a different color. A clear description for each class helps users understand the expected response, whether an additional control or mitigation is required. For example, mitigation required, and here we can say that risk acceptable. You can configure risk acceptability directly inside the risk matrix. This makes it immediately clear which risk levels are acceptable and which require further treatment or approval. So let's say that this serious and probable risk is still high. We can configure the risk classes directly inside this matrix. And finally, you have to give a recognizable name to this risk model so that everybody in your organization can understand what it stands for when different methodologies are used. So let's say that this is for simple project risks. Now that the model has been created, it appears in the list of risk model templates, and we can assign it to the Jira space where we want to use this risk assessment model. All the Jira spaces that I have access to will be listed here, and we can add it to the particular project that we want to. And this is how you create risk models. In the next video, we'll create a risk table and connect it to this risk model so your team can start recording and managing risks. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.